your dam left half's in county X and the right half's in county Y, you may have 2 phone calls, but assuming that they're not split, the stream doesn't split the county. We had a couple other EAP questions. They were specific to the state. Let's take a phone call. Well, if you didn't get your nap in under EAP, we'll try it underneath Section 6, dam owner liability, public safety, and security. In all seriousness, this one's kind of a fun one. Not too much fun because you realize how much liability there exists when you store elevated water, but because it kind of puts some things in perspective. Well, is the engineer just being a little over dramatic? And yeah, maybe. But engineers really aren't that overly dramatic, so maybe not. We're going to briefly discuss legal premise, dam owner negligence, standard of duty, and breach of standard of duty. The definition of strict liability, the dam owner's best defense, public safety liability, and dam security issue. Big caveat. Do you want to cover those before we get started, Jill?
Yes.
We're going to stop right after caveat. I'm an engineer.
You're not an attorney.
I am not an attorney. The information provided here is based on our experience and consultation with attorneys. When in doubt, please contact qualified legal counsel. In all seriousness, I think we're pretty safe, but
Although we have a few engineers around here who think they are. We are the professionals. So, we should do that one.
while they're going through,
There's
we
talking about an attorney one.
read some of the questions. They're specific EAPs. It's just easier to clean these questions
Take
up
that
now.
one, split it. Okay. Okay, we'll take it. So our first question is completion of DHEC form 2606, and I think that is our older EAP. Template, is it adequate? Right now, we do have a lot of dam owners that still use that. We have already developed a new template, and we've provided those to all of our existing high and significant hazard dam owners. So for those, we do want you to use the newer template. And what we're working on, and this kind of covers into another question on are we going to do EAPs for the ones we're doing reclasses. Right now, we're going to shift our focus and not provide the full completed EAP to the ones that are going through reclass, but what we are doing is certainly the inundation maps. We've got those, we'll provide you those. But we are going to be working, and some members of what we call our A team, who are interns, are going to be working to provide it, get a new template together that you just fill in the information that's needed. And we're always available through our regional engineers or our staff here to help with you on templates. And is
Yeah, the new template is, the 2606 form that someone referenced is about a 5-page form. Our new EAP template is closer to maybe 20 pages, plus a lot of good material in the appendices. But the full template is on the CD as a Microsoft Word document, so you can edit it yourself. And again, we're happy to help in any way to provide information. But the inundation mapping, which is one of the key parts of the EAP, we either have that already, or we are more than happy to create it for you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you mentioned reclass. Are you saying that if you're going for a reclassification, you do not do an EAP at this time?
you do, once we reclass, and we're final with that, so you're moving maybe from a low hazard to a high hazard, you're going to have an EAP. But right now, because we've got to shift some of our resources around, we're not going to provide you that fully completed document that you just need to review and sign. But we've got a template that you basically fill in the blanks that we will give you to And the maps that Joe said are such a critical part of the EAP. We've got that, and we'll give you those. So I would say that we'll give you a product that's probably 75% complete, and certainly work with you to make sure it's fully filled out.
So do we have to request those documents, or not just gonna send them?
If you'll just send us an email, we can get it to you.
Just, and just to repeat her question, it was, do you need to request these documents from us? And yes, you just need to send us an email or give us a phone call. You know, we have, I think go to our website, really, is the best way. It's very simple, www.scdhec.gov/dams. And you can contact us, email or phone, and we'll help you. That's request the maps, request if you need another copy of the template or whatever, we can help.
And when does it have to be completed, once we get it?
The question was, so once you're reclassed, and that's a process that it's not instantaneous. It takes place over. We normally inform you of the preliminary decision and give you 60 days. You can challenge it. You can, maybe we're wrong. You can hire an engineer to review our preliminary determination. And then after 60 days, then we will finalize that decision. And that's also that's a decision that can be appealed if you want, But once that's a finalized decision, then you need that EAP document. And we will give you time even from that point. We'll work with you. Really, you need to have that EAP. The latest is when you are scheduled for an inspection. That's when you have to provide to the inspector that finalized EAP. Hope that helps. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You said you mailed out some of these VAPs to the high hazard dam?
We have. And if you haven't let me know, and we'll make.
We haven't got
Okay. We'll get your information.
Because his was reclassed.
Okay.
We sent them out to the ones that were high significant hazard as of August of 2017. So if you've been reclassified since then, you did not get
Okay.
the completed template.
Just so the question was, he's a high hazard dam, hasn't received an EAP from DHEC. That's because your dam was a recent reclassification, basically within the last year. As of August 2017, that's around the time we created, for what highs and significant hazard dams we had at that time, we created the EAPs for. If you've been reclassified since then, we didn't create one for you, but again, we can help you. The template is on the CD. The maps we can provide, so that's what you'll need to do.
And I would just touch base with Hannah. She really can help you get everything
We're
together.
talking
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, your regional engineer is your best resource, and central office is also available. But that relationship with your regional engineer is very important. We got a few more written questions. The question is, does the state have a list of companies or firms to inspect the riser/gates and/or who will repair the riser/gates? If so, can you share that list with us? We don't have that list. We don't maintain a list of all the different inspection. There are companies that do diving services or underwater video services. I actually have a few of those companies on a list, but it's not a very exhaustive list. And then repair work, that's probably something the consulting engineers could point you in the direction of, or just sometimes if it's metal, a metal fabrication company either can probably point you in the direction of some good contractors. But no, man, we don't have an exhaustive list of that.
to, and read this caveat again before I answer it. So, discuss the roles and responsibilities on dams located in SCDOT or county right-of-way. Yeah, I hear the last. That is a challenging question, and one that many of our owners face here in South Carolina. Unfortunately, there is not an easy answer to that. We've worked on a lot of dams over the past 3 years where that have been damaged because of a flood, where we've tried to work to hash that out. Some of those end up going to courts and getting the courts to hash it out. But what I could suggest is work with DOT. You can request the right-of-way documents and easements for the stretch of roadway that the dam sits on. And this is a very site-by-site determination. And look and see when SCDOT came to a landowner in the 1930s or the 1950s and acquired right-of-way, oftentimes there's mention of who was responsible for maintaining the gates in those documents. So your first step is to contact DOT and get copies of the right-of-way plans or easements associated with that stretch of roadway. What I might suggest is start with your local DOT maintenance office. There's one in every county, and they can help point you to the direction of the staff that can get you those. Certainly, we've got contacts with DOT. I don't know yet that I've found a dam that really DOT has full responsibility for, and we do have a couple of cases in court now that we're a party to, where we're trying to hash that out. So it is a challenge throughout the state of South Carolina that we tackle almost each and every day. The next question is on the record keeping and inspection requirements, if any, for dam owners. So as dam owners in South Carolina, you're not required to hire an independent engineer to perform an inspection on any routine basis. We do inspections of regulated dams based on the hazard classification. And what our goal is to go out and do what we call preliminary inspection of a dam once every 2 years for high hazard dams and once every 3 years for significant hazard dams. Sometimes we may be out there more frequently. In the past, it was a little more sporadic, but with the staffing we've got now, we really are one of our priorities is to meet our inspection schedules. For low hazard dams, we, aside from this big batch of inspections we've done over the past year and a half, mainly what we do with those dams are what we call hazard evaluations. So looking to see if low hazard is truly the appropriate classification. But what I do encourage you on a record keeping standpoint is that anytime you do maintenance to your dam, that you cut trees or remove debris, or if you do repair work, that you just keep a file on that. And because it could come back down the road to help you out if there's ever any issues with your dam. So just keeping a good old manila file folder with pictures or a folder on your computer of what you're doing. Certainly the one record that if you sell your dam, it is the regs and statutes require the seller of the property to notify DHEC when a transfer of ownership has occurred. So you need to make sure you let us know, and we appreciate you keeping updated on that. And then of course, any other records, if we're working to get a permit out, that may need records of that, and your emergency action plans, that's one of the biggest.
I would just add to what Jill said, if you do maintenance, if you do that, and send us copies. We'd like to keep good files and good records on all the dams that we regulate. So if you're maintaining a file, we'd like to have the same information. We'd love to know that you did this bit of maintenance or this work. So definitely share that with us too. I have a question regarding. This is a good question about the regulatory requirements, and So if your dam doesn't meet the 3 criteria for regulation by DHEC, let me reiterate, those 3 criteria are the height of the dam being 25 feet or greater, the maximum impoundment volume being 50 acre-feet or greater, or the failure of the dam would likely cause the loss of life. If your dam doesn't fall under any of those criteria, you are exempt from regulation. And so the follow-up is, do you still need a permit from DHEC for dam repairs? If you're exempt from regulation, you don't need a permit from DHEC. Now, there may be other regulatory bodies out there, or your counties, there may be other legal and regulatory requirements you have to meet, but you don't need a permit from South Carolina DHEC Dam Safety.
The last one I have is, what's the extent of DHEC's assistance available to help stop a failure, or other emergency services? Certainly, as if you've got a dam that is at risk of failure, first and foremost, reiterate what Joe said, call your local emergency management. Get them on the scene first so we can get the people out of the way. If we're approaching a dam and we consider it at urgent risk of failure, we do have some resources. What we would first probably do is get whoever from our staff out there as quickly as we can to assess the situation. If we determine that, failure is likely and we have time, what we would do is issue an emergency order to the owners, and that directs you to take action. But what it also does is it gives us authority. If you're either unable or if we've got an owner that's unwilling, it gives us authority to step in and take actions on behalf of the state. And we've had to do that a couple of times. And what we do is we have contract. We have 2 contractors on an on-call basis. The state budget, what was the Budget and Control Board, they gave us authority to keep a contractor on call so we can get them out there to install siphons, to pumps, whatever we think is necessary, pull spillway boards. But in the meantime, we're going to be working with local emergency and management officials to shut roads down. If we feel that homes are at risk of failure, maybe to try to evacuate citizens. But certainly we do have some tools that we can utilize. Now, I will tell you that certainly that we can seek cost recovery on those. I mean, we don't want to have to do that, but that's a tool that we can use. And sometimes we know that we're going to be able to get somebody out there faster than you can. But we certainly even have worked with DOT and our other state agencies to make that happen.
I've got 2 more, and then we'll let Joe get back to the liability of dam owners. But so one question is, the emergency spillway considered part of the dam? Yes, it's a critical, functional part of the dam. So the dam is the structure that impounds water. The spillways, the emergency spillway, the primary spillway, those are all appurtenant structures that are a critical part of how the dam operates. So those are all part of the dam. If you own the emergency spillway, if that falls on your property, then you are a co-owner of the dam. And one more, this is a question I think I need to have a one-on-one conversation. This DHEC just eliminated / banned one of the best grasses used bankside to stop erosion. Please help us understand why. I don't think DHEC has banned the use of any kind of grasses. That wouldn't be, yeah.
I know DNR and other agencies and Clemson have invasive species that they don't like to see, but certainly, Get with one of our, if you submitted this question, get with one of us and we can see if we can help figure out what's going on and who may have been the source. And Eric wanted me to reiterate, when it comes to EAPs, and this is also something we heard from county emergency managers when we've met with them, they won't be your EAP. So make sure, if you've got an EAP, call your local county emergency manager. Schedule a time to come in and sit down with them and talk. They are, at least some of them, particularly in the upstate, are just there. They really are eager to get those and to work with dam owners. So make sure you set up a time to do that, because they are another critical partner in this. And I know we've got EMD staff here to reiterate, and who we work with on a routine basis to help bridge those gaps and improve those relationships. Okay.
Thanks.
All righty. Great to get some of those questions answered. So we can move on with dam owner liability. Real briefly, the objectives are a brief discussion on responsibility, standard of duty, strict liability, the public safety responsibility, and some dam safety procedures. I know my next statement is going to seem a little bit hard for some people to swallow, but we do live in a very litigious society. So, unfortunately, if there is a dam failure, and Oroville will point this out, for a serious dam safety incident, and just for clarity, everybody remembers Oroville is the dam in California where the dam didn't fail, but there was an evacuation because of concern. If there is a dam failure or a serious dam safety incident, that there is a pretty good chance there's going to be widespread litigation, particularly if it's a catastrophic dam failure. So everybody that's remotely associated with a dam is going to see some paperwork from an attorney, the engineer, dam safety, the owner, that's the way it goes. So as we were just saying, that those that likely be included in litigation, the owners, operators, inspectors, engineers, contractors, state dam safety officials, and if your name even remotely shows up on a piece of paper that you happen to walk by the dam. Maybe a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but the lawsuits, based upon our experience, will claim extensive liability on the part of everyone. It'll be up for the lawyers to decide who is truly liable, but they will do an extensive shotgun approach. So let's talk a little bit about negligence. Negligence is defined as failure to exercise care to avoid failure. And that's it. It's failure to take the reasonable steps to prevent a certain catastrophic item from occurring. For high hazard dams in which there is a loss of life, there is a higher standard of care generally expected of the dam owner because of the documented potential for the loss of life. I think it would be reasonable to conclude that in the state of South Carolina, where we have significant hazard due to the presence of roads, that slightly higher standard of care may apply to significant hazards as well. Maybe not to quite the same degree as high hazard, but to significant hazards. Negligence in any of the following can occur. Design, that'd be the engineer. Operation, inspection, remedial repairs, assuming they were done or needed, construction, regulation, and maintenance. Dam owners, we've said this for a variety of reasons today, and for numerous times throughout the day, are responsible for carrying out inspection of the dam and doing it regularly and completely. Go along with that, to protect yourself from the litigious society, I recommend that you document the inspection. To generally have it stated somewhere that I walked the dam and didn't see any issues on November 9th, that's better than nothing being in the file, I guarantee you. Monitor the conditions regularly. Keep up with the water levels. Notice if your piezometers are changing, assuming those exist, you have to feed your water levels. If the seepage is changing. I know we've talked about this, but from a litigious point of view, this is what will help protect you. I did what I was supposed to do. Maintain the facility. And the toughest of them all is a meet appropriate regulations and standard of care. Going back to the EAP, assuming we have a serious issue with the dam that requires evacuation, having an EAP that is up to date, tested, and has a complete set of records is another measure to reduce your potential liability should there be an issue with the dam. Having something you can lay out front, so I did what I said I was going to do. The minimum standards of duty are set forth by numerous different items. Statutes. The statutes will be different depending on who your regulatory agency is. For most of you, that's going to be South Carolina Dams and Reservoir Safety Act. You folks that have FERC-regulated projects, they'll be set by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, so on and so forth. The regulations is missing a paren are actually defined as the South Carolina Dams and Reservoir Safety Act regulations. Pretty straightforward. That's the regulations that the state has that says these are the minimum standards. That's in addition to the act. In addition to those standards, the standard of duty or the standard of care, if you will also be defined as the professional or industry standards that are in play at the time the incident takes place. It's hard to say they come back and sue you 20 years later, which I'm not saying it's possible to say, well, the technology got better, it doesn't work that way. What happens then? But those standards of care include the Army Corps of Engineers. Pretty good dam design agency. They have a series of documents that's online. I think Randy mentioned it. The NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Here's a ghost. They were the preeminent designer of earth dams, flood control dams in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. This gentleman in the office, or in the crowd, who I think designed a bunch of them. But they have documents that are outstanding that set the standard of care of way things should be done. And of course, that's the SCS being renamed the NRCS. And a couple of others would be the United States Bureau of Reclamation, and then not up there is FEMA, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or Federal Emergency Management Agency. You are considered to have breached the standard of duty or standard of care when you do not maintain the standard. I know it seems simple to say. The problem is, an expert can get on the stand and simply say that. You hope for high ethical standards and they would adhere to them. But the truth of the matter is, unfortunately, folks can say things they shouldn't say. But the best thing you have is the documentation. Evidence that supports that you didn't do what you said you're going to do is obviously a breach. Common sense. You obviously disregarded your project as evidenced by lack of maintenance, so on and so forth. It's pretty obvious to identify. And then unfortunately, legal theory, and please don't ask questions on that one. So I'm going to get past the breach of the standard of duty must be established causation of damage to injury to the plaintiff. I am sure there's a legal brief that gives a layman's term to that, but in the end, someone's got to believe that they've been truly injured. Obviously, if it's a dam failure, a high hazard dam, and it's been a loss of life, I think proving the injury is pretty straightforward. It gets a little more complicated if it becomes environmental damage and you're saying, well, I put sediment in someone's lake or in someone's stream. That becomes a little bit more difficult to prove, assuming that you don't have true physical damages. Obviously, if the dam were to fail and the road were washed out or utilities were damaged, that's pretty easy to point out. So, as we just stated, damages include loss of life, personal injury, emotional distress. That's the one that, who decides whether they had emotional distress or not? Property value, restoration or replacement cost, and diminished value. So your liability from public safety. You may be liable if you fail to warn the public. That's simple. Assuming that you should have known or did know that the dangerous condition existed. So if you have a concrete spillway and you don't have no trespassing or no skateboarding and that sign's not up there, I know it sounds simple, but that comes down to the statement of having a attractive nuisance on your property. A lake unto itself can be considered an attractive nuisance to some people. I want to go fish. You're not welcome to fish. It's a private lake. So sign simple as no trespassing may be something that's worth putting up. I know it seems silly, but you can also be liable if you fail to construct or maintain the structure in good repair. See if I can do that again. Pretty straightforward. You must be able to document and identify that you've corrected the situation or warned them a situation exists. And the one that seems to be getting a lot of folks are these low-head dams. I think Randy recently mentioned this. I don't know, you're talking about a low-head dam real quick. These are these run-of-the-river dams. They're 10 to 20 feet tall. And then when the water goes over them, there's a roller that forms in the back. And the technical term is a hydraulic jump. What happens is boats go into that. And because of several different hydraulic phenomena, you can't get out. Well, people have gone over them because they want to dive off the dam. It's considered, people have now said you should be warning the public this is a dangerous situation. I think other folks would say that you should know it's a dangerous situation, but whether it was posted or not seems to be the legal definition. In the end, though, you do not have to insure against the danger. You just simply have to act reasonably and notify. So if they trespass, and that's one situation, at least legally, now I can't tell you what the jury's going to do or anything else, but at least legally, you have a leg to stand on, so to speak. Courts do recognize, thank goodness, that people are sometimes injured and that the certain person or agency is not always at fault. So, last item as we move on from this is owners and operators are obligated to inspect all facilities in adjoining areas. We've touched on this many times. This just comes into, it is your responsibility to inspect and maintain your dam. That's what it comes down to. A quick story, won't name the innocent or the guilty, but unfortunately we were the expert witness on the death of a couple of children. We were not the cause, we were simply providing some analysis. The mother claimed that the children were washed away due to the fault of the dam owner. We actually were able to prove that the dam owner did everything they should have done. The point that this gets to, though, is children are unable to understand the danger of certain conditions. My two certainly do, or don't care. So signs are not going to be enough. So owners and operators do have a somewhat greater responsibility for the safety of children. I don't know how you deal with that exactly. Bluntly, I mean, that's one of those cases you really got to get an attorney involved. At some point, the parents have to be involved. So, for a liability to exist, injury must have occurred, dangerous conditions must have existed, negligent or wrongful action. In other words, you failed to do maintenance, you failed to notify, and you either had the knowledge or should have had the knowledge and did not do anything about it. Make sure you keep the premises safe. Avoid conditions that could injure even trespassers. Seems a little bit unfair, but that is the case. And to the extent possible, correct existing and dangerous conditions and post warnings. That's your key, post warnings. For inspections to meet public safety requirements, they must be conducted at frequent intervals. SCD does have recommended intervals. So do NRCS and the Bureau and everybody else. So if you can adhere to them and stick with them, I think that puts you in a better situation. Conducted at a time when normal conditions are likely to have changed. So you have your standard interval, and then you're talking about post-floods, post-earthquakes, whatever the case may be. And then going along with the inspection is document your corrective actions. Make sure you have a record of what you did to fix the situation. Similarly, if you do have an accident, whatever it may be, document the accident, document the corrective action. All right. The most common hazardous areas around dams are your spillways, your spillway basins, the outlet works, which would be the riser tower, and any other place we have moving water in essence. The downstream slope in Merthen Dam at 3 to 1 is not overly dangerous, thank goodness. Other areas that may be, if you have a concrete gravity dam specifically, you've seen the example that Randy put up where you had the dam was vertical, especially for a concrete dam. Failure to have handrails, appropriate signage would be considered a hazard. Power lines, swimming beaches, also. Those are typically less common for smaller dams. As I said at the beginning, you do need signs. Signage is, in essence, your saving grace. They should warn of the hazard, explain how to avoid, and the consequences to fail to avoid. There it is. Fencing. On that photo, it would be appropriate to make the following statement. Depending on the size of the reservoir and whether or not the public can access the reservoir, warning buoys upstream of this dam or spillway, as the case may be, a small boat that was fishing that lost power or lost track of what they're doing could make an unfortunate trip in the wrong direction. Having a log boom or safety boom would be an appropriate way to mitigate your risk on a project of that nature. That's similar to Labyrinth Weir spillways or any open channel spillway that someone could readily go over. Now we said fencing again. Similar in the background, Labyrinth Weir, water spilling over. This is obviously under new construction. Boat were to get up close to that without appropriate signage could be an issue. If you have a road over top of your dam, even if it's not a state, county, local road, guardrails or other methods to restrict vehicular access, obviously it's a private dam on your private property. It's a different issue. Floating barriers, which we just talked about, safety ladders. I'm going to tell you safety ladders present two issues. You have them for a means to get out of a steep area. Guess what it gives you as a means to get in the steep area? I don't know how to answer that one, to be honest with you. I understand the need that you got to find access to get out. You know the rest of that story. So, typically speaking, you're going to have plunge pools as opposed to impact basins. But I'm telling you, this is a bad place to be is if for whatever reason that pipe were to charge and you're between that pipe and that wall, whoever that is gonna have a real bad day. So having applicable fencing or appropriate fencing even down the side of this channel would be appropriate. The same thing would apply to a plunge pool. That plunge pool is basically designed to go to the theoretical depth of scour. So that means for a 48-inch pipe, you're talking about an excavation depth that's probably approaching 6 to 8 feet before you ever hit riprap. Kids that can't swim or whatever the case may be, thinking they're in a safe position, that's not a good place. Fencing may be appropriate, especially in high traffic areas. Also recognize during high flow conditions that fencing could be damaging, it may be subject to need for repair. Railing around risers. Honestly, I would rather see a good trash rack. I think it accomplishes the exact same goal. There are some very specific risers out there that are not real common anymore. If you have one, I welcome the chance to speak with you. One of them is called a Morning Glory Spillway. It's basically an OG that's 360 degrees. If you ever see one, it will freak you out because it looks like there's a hole in the water. I mean, it literally looks like a hole in the water. If you have one of those, let's talk offline. But for the rest of them, I think you're better off to have an appropriate trash rack as opposed to a handrail. We did talk about floating barriers. Here's an example. There's your protection right there. Where'd you take that one? Anyways, there's an example of floating barriers. Floating barriers are actually appropriate also upstream if you have a riser, even if it has a trash rack. Keeping people generally away from your dam is a good idea, assuming that you can't control access to the entire body of the lake. Dam security. Okay. This is getting to be a bigger and bigger and bigger item. I don't know how many folks in the room, and I'm not going to ask for a roll call or anything like that, but if you have a dam that you have items that are controlled by the internet, I suggest you contact someone other than me to make sure that it cannot be reasonably accessed via the internet. Depending on the agency, some of them actually require positive disconnects and you only hook it back up when you want to make a change. In other words, there's enough concern that people can activate spillway gates remotely, so you actually literally have a physical disconnect. Only when you want to operate the gate, you plug it back in. I'm not enough of an internet guy to say whether that's really an issue or not. If you live in a public area, consider physical security. In other words, limiting access where you want the boats to go in, assuming your lake or your impoundment is public access. We just talked about cyber security. We've talked about personal security, information security. If you're dealing with a dam that happens to be regulated by FERC, it is considered critical energy infrastructure, and they do not want it released for a variety of reasons. And to some extent or another, I would generally recommend that you don't just make all your dam information generally available to the public. The key stuff, the dam breach inundation map, it's going to be out there. Real quick, I don't think we need to spend much time on security. There's the definition. Condition that results from the establishment and maintenance of protective measures that ensure a state of resistance from hostile acts. So why do you need to secure your dam? Public health and safety, public confidence, government, critical function, infrastructure, and the environment. Assuming that most of these are fairly small, it's going to be the first one and the second one. Public confidence is less of an issue. Most of these are not going to be water supply. There's your potential security threats. Terrorism, disgruntled employees, unauthorized operation. I think that one's probably the biggest one. Randy mentioned removing your gate wheel so people can't play with the gate and drain your lake and flood people downstream. When you remove your gate operator, make sure you know where you put it or lock it. That's another mechanism. Chain it so it can't be operated. Keep in mind these are attractive nuisances. We talked about those briefly. Kids throwing stones down piezometers or cleanouts for drains. Neighbor disputes. I have seen that a time or two where two people are complaining or fighting over who's responsible for what and are willing to do damage to the other person's property. Unfortunately, it happens. Most of the projects here probably are not going to be overly subject to terrorism. You never know. There is the National Homeland Security Act of 2002. It does discuss infrastructure protection. It may be good bedtime reading. Critical assets or facility to destruction or compromise would result in a high consequence event. Saluda Dam certainly fits that. Others may or may not fall in the critical assets that still need to be protected and from generalized unauthorized access. So, some other information that are available, I'm not going to read these, but they'll be available in the CD. 4 categories of security: physical, cyber, personnel, and information. All these discuss means to control physical access, cyber access, personal access, or information. Your risk applies to all of those. What is risk? Oh boy, it's the new buzzword. No, I'm just kidding. Risk is the probability that an undesirable act or event will occur. Now, that risk also applies to storms and everything else, but we're specifically talking about risk from unauthorized accident at the moment. But we're going to kind of explain that. We're going to compound that a little bit. And what I mean by that is, so we've talked about specifically the risk of your project creating damage downstream. We're also going to talk about that as it includes a storm or a earthquake or another natural event occurring. So risk is the consequence times vulnerability times the threat. So your consequence would be the loss from the undesirable event, the vulnerability that would happen. Here it specifically says adversary, but the probability that an earthquake would occur also would take place. The risk process is determine the consequence of an adverse event, loss of life, economic, assuming that the reservoir was used to provide drinking water, that would obviously come into economic impact. Determine the vulnerabilities associated. So, common vulnerabilities would be failure of the gates, hydroelectric facilities, damage to the freeboard, and then damage to the inlet and outlet structures. From a terroristic point of view, the saving grace is while there has been research done by the Corps of Engineers on how much explosive it would take to damage one of these facilities, generally speaking, earth dams are hard to damage from terroristic activities, not impossible, hard. But you can damage the gates, you can damage the outlet works, you can do other things with the dam itself. We've talked about instrumentation is certainly able to be damaged, whether that be your monitoring well or your cleanout. If you can get inside the structure, which we haven't talked a whole lot about and probably will stay away from, inspection galleries, which are basically tunnels inside of a concrete gravity dam, if you can get inside of that, then that's a problem. They're generally controlled access locations anyways. And then gate controls and SCADA systems. So if you continue the risk process, conduct a threat assessment, including external and internal, and then contact local law enforcement. That is the most important thing you need to realize as relatively small dam owners in the grand scheme of things. If you believe you have a risk to your project that is not something you can control, in other words, putting a padlock on it, I suggest you call local law enforcement. That is the biggest item. I have unauthorized access. This is a private dam. It's got a fence, it's got a gate, or whatever the case may be. Call the cops. Available tools, there they are. RAMD was common about 10 years ago. FERC's risk-informed decision-making is a pretty common ground now. Corps of Engineers risk model. is also one if you think it's necessary for the projects in which you're involved. Physical security. Pretty straightforward. Methods to keep people from accessing. We touched on this. If your project is in a location that does not require access by the public, I do suggest you keep them away. Fences prevent access, delay their access. You can put up barriers, you can put up surveillance cameras, put up signage. If people are up there going, good night, do we really need all this stuff? Depends on the size of your project. There are projects that do require it, there's projects that do not require it. Word response, depending on location, there are some HOAs that have their own police. They should be able to access the site. Mitigate the adverse effects of high consequence acts by having heavy equipment, replacement parts, etc. INTAS, National Terrorism Advisory System, there's a bulletin that describes the elevated alerts, generally for projects not going to be exposed. If you want to talk about security plans, the data is on the CD. We certainly can go through it. If anybody has a specific discussion they'd like to have about the security plan, when you elevate, similar to an EAP, the concept is similar. But it goes through the whole process of informing employees, maintaining contact with law enforcement, restricting access. We touched on cybersecurity. I know it sounds odd, but there really have been some instances where they say you can access someone's home security through your thermostat. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not an IT person. Cybersecurity for dams is specifically more for electrical generation and transmission, water level measurements, and physical access. So in other words, if you have automated gate systems, if you don't have automated gates, and you're not monitoring your water level via the internet, and you're not on an electrical transmission grid, probably not a big issue. And the available cybersecurity tools are listed in case your project is in need of access or creating cybersecurity. That is a whole different ballgame. Personal security, personnel security. If you're hiring folks, we strongly recommend, as does Homeland Security, that you do a background check, credit check, drug testing, so on and so forth, to make sure folks that have access to your dam meet your minimum qualifications. Insider threat seems to be the largest of the issues. So by following those procedures, you're better off and you limit the threat to the project. Going a little deeper, prevent and prepare. The biggest way is to segregate duties. Similar to EAPs, you would have security threat plans, and you would validate them and test them, and you would document past incidents. Similar to the EAP is you do have a response and recovery phase, and that's intended to limit damage and to minimize downtime should an impact occur and minimize economic consequences. Information security, we're just about done for those. Let's put them to sleep. Information security is what we were talking about briefly. FERC does actually limit access to certain information. It should be determined what needs to be in everybody's hands versus what needs to be in the public's hands, specifically for dams. I know it seems a little odd, but there are information sharing mechanisms. The State Dam Safety Office can control what's released. They do have, is it FOIA in South Carolina, or do you have, because Georgia has to be different, called GORA, Georgia Open Records Request.
Yeah.
So that's able to control the access. There's only released once a request is made and it's deemed a legitimate request. There's a dam portal that you can actually use for providing secure data on dams. My guess is this will be the first and the last time you'll see it. Reporting an incident. It's common sense. I know it seems simple, but if people are taking pictures of your project, and they shouldn't be, either report them or have them leave. Or better yet, have the police have them leave. Report suspicious activity if you have a large enough project or your project is considered critical infrastructure, local law enforcement, Homeland Security, FBI. Typical suspicious activities are attempted breach, misrepresentation to access, cyber attack, photography, observation of the site. Certainly not going to name them all. Homeland Security does provide brochures and information on suspicious activity. You do need to provide an accurate report. And this is important. I've kind of gone through a lot of items rather quickly, but if you do have a project and you are monitoring security and you want to file a report, please make sure it's accurate. And the reason for that is if you have a project and they're monitoring it, then there's a pretty good chance that the same folks are monitoring something else, assuming that it's a legitimate threat. So make sure you're reporting the information accurately and timely. Some reporting tools or procedures are provided at the following locations. Don't everybody go to it all at once, it'll crash your website. I know you got your cell phones out. Includes a reference library. Continued reference information.